It's the morning of D-Day in Normandy. Captain Miller is struggling to keep his hands steady and some of his men are seasick. They're the first Americans arriving there to fight the Nazis. These are the brave men with extensive training, but nothing could have prepared them for this. Before they get to land, machine guns are spitting fire throughout the beach, taking them out by the dozens. Miller tells his men to jump over the sides of the boat, but many are shot underwater anyway. Others are pulled down by the weight of their own gear. On the shore, Miller watches the horror around him in shock. He shouts out to Sergeant Horvath, and they both make their way up the beach. They realize that nobody is where they were supposed to be. The troops ended up scattered all over the beach.
Have yourself some weapons! Follow me!
Communication is a disaster, and the carnage never stops. Still, they manage to get close to a German bunker where the machine gun fire is coming from. Captain Miller believes that's a job for Private Jackson, and he's right. With a short prayer, Jackson hits the target with one elegant shot. That clears their way up and they invade the bunker with a flamethrower, setting the whole thing on fire. It looks like the tables are turning and the Americans are gaining ground.
Let them burn!
Once the worst is over, Miller sits down and takes in the ghastly view. Back in the States, typewriters are in full swing, producing hundreds and hundreds of the very worst letters a parent could ever receive. One of the clerks finds something alarming in one of the letters to be typed. It's a surname she has seen twice before, Ryan. Collecting all three letters, she takes them to her superiors. It is then confirmed. A poor mother in Iowa is about to receive the tragic news that 3 of her sons have passed away. And there's more. The youngest brother is also in Normandy, but nobody knows exactly where. This is taken to General Marshall, the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, who reads aloud a letter he had with him. It's the Bigsby letter, believed to have been addressed to a mother of 5 sons who were executed in action.
Written a long time ago to a Mrs. Bixby in Boston.
It's signed by Abraham Lincoln, but what settles the issue is not the weight of that name or the painful message on the letter. It's the fact that General Marshall is able to keep going even after he puts it down. He has memorized all these words, probably haunted by the possibility of ever having to make such a decision.
Boy's alive.
3 days have passed since D-Day and Captain Miller is now reporting to his commanding officer. There's a new assignment for him, a public relations mission coming from high up. He's taking a squad to Newville in order to locate Private James Francis Ryan, believed to have been part of an airborne misdrop somewhere in that area.
This went straight from the top.
The captain informed Sergeant Horvath about the mission, not sounding all that confident about it. He selects 5 men to join the squad, but he still needs a translator. Corporal Upham speaks French and German. That's the good news about him. Bad news is that he's never been in combat and hasn't held a weapon since basic training. He asks him if he should bring along his typewriter. Miller answers that by tossing it to the ground.
Take your time for it.
Now the squad is complete and on the move. Poor Corporal Upham is doing his best to fit in with the others, but they seem to resent his lack of experience. The only one who's a little bit nicer to him is Wade, the medic. He's also the only one who speaks in favor of their mission when Private Rybin says it's crazy to risk 8 lives to save 1. Wade tells him to think of Ryan's poor mother.
There's not a reason why, there's but to do and die.
Jackson also has his 2 cents on the matter, mentioning his own remarkable aim as a God-given gift that should be put to good use. Captain Miller lets them voice their opinions freely, but ends the discussion with a reminder that good soldiers follow orders blindly.
He's good.
The squad arrives at a small village where a German voice from the loudspeakers says the Statue of Liberty is kaput. That's part of an effort to break their spirit. They meet Sergeant Hill, who's disappointed to learn they're not the relief unit. Miller asks him about Private Ryan. Hill says he's not there, but maybe in a mixed unit on the other side of the town. He warns him it's not easy to get there and mentions some intense rifle action somewhere along the way. They decide to send a runner there to find out, but he gets hit right in front of them. Private Caparzo is outraged to see they don't stop, even after he's down, but Miller reminds him they would do just the same. Unable to establish communication, the squad takes some side roads to cross the village.
Go!
Upham is still trying to make conversation. He then learns that there's a mystery surrounding Captain Miller's past.
So you even know where he went to school?
Cam didn't go to school.
They arrive at a 2-story building with a giant hole on the side. A terrified family is on the upper floor with 2 children and a crying baby. Upham translates the captain's questions. The father begs them to take the children with them. Captain Miller says, "No way," but Caparzo ignores it and takes the little girl. He says the decent thing to do is at least take them down the road to the next town. Miller replies that they are not there to do the decent thing. Caparzo falls to the ground and everyone takes cover quickly. Jackson works out where the sniper is and tells the others not to step out.
I wouldn't venture out there, fellas.
Horvath tries to comfort the crying little girl while her dad is shouting in French, telling her to stay still. Caparzo is still alive, but he's in bad shape. He's also out in the open and no one is in position to pull him. Wade is shouting desperately, asking Miller if he can see Caparzo and where he was shot. Caparzo pulls out a letter he wrote to his dad and asks Mellish to send it. He sounds worried about the words getting too blurred. Up on the bell tower, the German sniper is aiming at Caparzo, and then Mellish's head poking from behind the car. He spots Jackson a moment too late and gets hit through his own scope.
We got him.
Once he's down, the men check the surroundings and the girl climbs back to her family, not too happy about Dad's earlier choices. Caparzo has met his demise by now. Very talented at hiding his emotions, Miller just says that this is why they can't take children. He takes his dog tag, and Wade takes the letter. When Sergeant Hill sits down to rest, he accidentally knocks over an entire wall behind him. That reveals an entire German squad inside the building, until the Germans are all taken down unexpectedly. They were taken out by Captain Hamill and the soldiers previously sent to find him. Once they've checked that all enemy soldiers are gone, Captain Hamill has good news for the squad. One of his men is Private James Ryan. By now, pretty much all the men in Miller's squad have developed a serious grudge against Ryan, especially Reiben, who never saw the point of this mission in the first place. They look him up and down while he comes running. Miller tells him he's going home because his brothers have passed away. He has a very emotional reaction to the news, which seems to soften the attitude towards him a little. But then he's confused to hear that they were hit in action. Both his brothers are still in school and not nearly old enough to join the army. And that's because this is not James Francis Ryan from Iowa. This is James Frederick Ryan from Minnesota. Miller and his men are disappointed, and this poor Ryan is now devastated that he's not going home.
What does that mean my brothers are okay?
Captain Hamill takes them to a church to rest for a few hours. Wade takes the opportunity to copy Caparzo's letter. Miller talks to Horvath about how hard it is to make decisions when they may end a young man's life. When Horvath goes to sleep, Upham takes the opportunity to ask the captain what he used to do for a living. Miller says he knows about the pool and jokingly promises to answer him if it reaches $500.
Get some sleep.
The next day, the squad gets to a rally point full of wounded soldiers. They get hold of a bag of dog tags from the Airborne Division. Reiben, Mellish, and Jackson start going through them to find the name Ryan, but no luck. Enjoying a rare moment when they get to sit down and chat, they start making jokes about some of the tags that come up, not realizing that the survivors from the same division are watching them. They don't really notice how rude that is until Wade sweeps the tags away, saying angrily that these are no poker chips. Miller looks ashamed because he didn't even know this was going on. In a desperate attempt and more venting than a real effort, Miller starts screaming if anyone has heard of James Ryan.
Later, Ryan!
Then someone actually brings him this guy from Ryan's original unit. They need to communicate in writing because he lost most of his hearing, but he does know the correct Ryan, and he even knows where he must be right now. Ryan got into a mixed unit and headed to a bridge on the Murderett River. Captain Miller assembles his men and lays out the map to draw their route. He takes a long time to realize that all his men are staring at his shaky hand. As their captain, he's supposed to be their steady rock. So he snaps the compass shut and tells them to get going.
Let's go.
On their way to the bridge, they stumble on a couple of men who've bit the dust and realize they've been hit by snipers in a bunker right under an old radar station. Miller wants to attack the bunker, so they must ambush the next company. Everyone else thinks this is too risky, but Miller is hell-bent on this. He can't let them question his decision and lose ground to his own men.
I don't have a good feeling about this one.
Upham stays behind with all the gear and watches the squad advance. After several machine gun rounds and grenade explosions, it seems to be all over. Then the panicked screams start, urging Upham to bring them the medical kit. Wade is badly injured and the others ask him what to do. He tries to talk them through the procedures, but they can't save him. Miller gets Caparzo's letter from his pocket. Then a punching sound is heard. Reiben is beating up a surviving German soldier and is quickly joined by the rest of the squad. The captain tells them to make the man dig the graves for Wade and the other two. Sitting where his men can't see, Miller starts crying his eyes out. When he gets back, the German soldier panics to see the whole squad gathering around him. He says he likes America and starts to shout everything he can say in English. Captain Miller blindfolds him while the others prepare for an execution. Totally shocked at them, Upham protests. And as it turns out, this is not Miller's intention. He makes the German march in the same direction for 1,000 paces and then turn himself in as soon as he comes across the Allied. Reiben declares that he's done with this mission and starts walking away. Then things start to escalate dangerously.
Get the hell off me.
Horvath pulls his gun on Reiben and says that unless he falls into formation and obeys their captain, he'll shoot. Everyone is frantically yelling at each other while Upham is begging Miller to intervene. And so he does. In a calm voice, he brings up the mystery about his own past, revealing that he's a school teacher.
I'm a school teacher.
He says that every time he claims the life of a man, the farther away he is from that man who taught English composition and coached the baseball team. From the look on the faces of the entire squad, nothing would have surprised them more. He fears his wife won't recognize the person he's become, and if it takes Saving Private Ryan to get his own life back, then that's the mission. Then they keep moving towards the Maderet River. While crossing a field, they see a German vehicle coming. They quickly take cover, but the vehicle is attacked from the other side by 3 American soldiers. After checking that all the Germans are down, they start the introductions. One of them is James Francis Ryan from the 101 Airborne Division. When Miller delivers the awful news, Ryan is mortified to hear about his brothers, but refuses to abandon his post. What used to be his unit is no more than a handful of privates now. They have no commanding officer and very little weaponry. But the bridge they are guarding is of enormous strategic value to both sides. They're not going anywhere. Miller tries to play the mother card on him, but he won't budge. In fact, no one seems to be more outraged by the whole mission than Ryan himself.
It doesn't make any sense, sir.
He refuses to desert the men who have been fighting by his side. His mother will understand his decision to stay with the only brothers he has now. So Miller has a chat with Horvath about this unexpected turn of events. They cannot come back empty-handed any more than they can force the boy to return, so they decide to stay and defend the bridge with that handful of feisty privates. They're expecting the Germans to arrive at any minute, so they come up with a plan of action that makes the most of whatever weaponry they still have. Miller orders Ryan to stay close to him at all times and puts Jackson up on the bell tower. Then they keep waiting until they hear a faint rumbling sound in the distance. Jackson signals from the tower that at least 50 German troops are coming. Everyone takes their position and the battle starts. Jackson's prayers get shorter and faster while he targets several Germans on the ground. One of the cannons aims right at him and the top of the tower goes up in flames. Mellish runs out of ammo and waits for Upham to refuel him. But a German soldier attacks him directly. They start fighting and the German soldier overpowers him with a knife. Right outside, Upham is halfway up the stairs. He can hear Mellish dying, but he's too scared to move, even when the Nazi soldier leaves the room and stares at him. Reiben successfully neutralizes an enemy tank. Horvath is hit but can still walk, so he drags Upham from the stairway. It's time for them to regroup at the other side of the bridge. Upham fails to keep up and ends up trapped behind a barricade, inches away from an enemy squad. Reiben and Horvath are shooting with a bazooka at the remaining German tank when Miller orders to clear the bridge. They run towards them, but Horvath is hit again and has to be carried by Ryan. They're about to blow up the bridge now, but a shell from the tank knocks off the detonator from Miller's hand. Confused and stunned by the blast, Miller is dragged to safety. He decides to try and reach for the detonator, and the moment he stands up, he is hit. Upham recognizes Miller's shooter as the same German whose life they spared at the radar station. Miller is on the ground, badly wounded. The German tank is coming through the bridge. He starts shooting at it with a .45 pistol, knowing very well that it won't do any damage to the giant tank, but there's nothing else he can do. Then the tank explodes to his total surprise. Upham takes that opportunity to reveal himself and fires his weapon for the first time ever to shoot the man who shot the captain. Then he joins Reiben and Ryan. They're trying to save Miller, but it's in vain. The last thing Captain Miller says to Ryan before he dies is, "Earn this." Now, Upham and Rybin are the only two surviving members of the original squad. Rybin takes Caparzo's letter from Miller's body, and we hear General Marshall reading his own letter to Mrs. Ryan. Her son is coming home. Many decades later, Ryan is now an old man. Visiting Captain Miller's grave, he tells him he never forgot those last words and has done his best to be worthy of all that sacrifice. He salutes the captain one last time. And that's how it ends. This was a recap of the 1998 DreamWorks movie Saving Private Ryan, starring Tom Hanks and Matt Damon. So what do you think Captain Miller should have done differently? What would you do in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below with #CinemaRecap. Until next time.